We continue with our pre-recorded virtual daily Gemara shir. We are Kuv Zayin Amud Beis 107b. And today the Gemara concludes its commentary on the opening Mishnah of this chapter. The structure of the Gemara, as many of you I'm sure are aware, is that the Talmud is divided between the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Mishnah, of course, is the primary text gathered by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi after the destruction of the temple, in which he collated in a succinct manner all of our oral Torah tradition. And the second part is the Gemara, the Babylonian commentary, which spans a few hundred years, commenting on the Gemara. So the structure of the Talmud is there's the Mishnah and then Gemara commentary on it. And sometimes the commentary lasts a half a page and sometimes it lasts pages. In our case, it lasted for quite a few pages, in that the opening Mishnah was that every Jew has a share in the world to come. And the Mishnah listed a few exceptions: 3 kings, 4 commoners. And the Gemara commented on all that. At the beginning, we commented on what the meaning of every Jew has a share in the world to come. And then there were exceptions of certain types of people who lose it, and the Gemara analyzed that. And then we analyzed these specific people, the 3 kings and the 4 commoners, or the 4 non-royalty who lost their share in the world to come. The last of these was Gehazi. That's what we've been discussing the last few days. Gehazi, the student of Elisha, the prophet Elisha, and he exploited Elisha's healing capacity, in that Elisha healed Naaman, the Aramaic general, from his spiritual tsaras, from his leprosy, and Gehazi went and exploited Naaman for money. Exploited Elisha's power to get money out of Naaman. Along with that, we came to discuss Elisha's relationship with Gehazi, specifically that he pushed him away with 2 hands, and that's where we were yesterday, in that another example of a teacher who pushed away a student with 2 hands without giving them a bit of way to do teshuvah, and ended in catastrophic results. The other example was Bishub ben Prachya and his student Yeshu. That's what we discussed yesterday. Now the Gemara gets back to its concluding its discussion on Elisha, the prophet Elisha, and then from there, the Gemara is going to get into a little discussion about sickness and aging, and that concludes the Gemara's commentary on the Mishnah. And then perhaps we'll begin a little bit of the next Mishnah, or maybe we'll leave that for tomorrow. We'll see. So the line begins with the word Tafresh, the beginning of the line, Tan Rabbanon. 9 lines from the bottom of the page. Kuv Zayin Amud Beis 107b. Tan Rabbanon, our sages taught, a Mishnaic age text. Gimel Chaloyim, there are 3 sicknesses that Chala Elisha, which Elisha experienced. He was ill 3 times in his life. And each time was for a different reason. Echad, the first time he became sick, was Shegira Dovim B'Tinokos, is the fact that he incited bears to attack children. What is that? So it's right at the beginning of Elisha's tenure as prophet. And it's a rather beautiful chapter in the book of Kings. And it describes like this. Before Eliyahu Hanavi, the chapter opens up when Eliyahu Hanavi is summoned basically to ascend into heaven. As we know, Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Eliyahu, Elisha's predecessor, did not die in the classic way that most humans do, but rather he ascended with his body up into heaven. And the chapter describes very beautifully how Eliyahu was traveling from town to town, and in each town Eliyahu tells Elisha, it's time for you to stay here, I have to keep on going. But Elisha insists and keeps on traveling with Eliyahu. And finally, they get to the final location after miraculously crossing the Jordan when Eliyahu and Levi splits the Jordan and the two of them walk together. And on the other side, Eliyahu says, time for you to stay here. And Elisha says, no, I'm staying. And Elisha asks Eliyahu, says, look, I'm leaving this world. Do you want anything? And Elisha says, yes, I would like to have a double portion of your spirit. Whatever divine powers has been invested in you, please give it to me in double measure. And Eliyahu says, if you want that, sure, but you have to watch me go. You have to watch me go. And he does, and he watches the chariot come down and raise him up, and he goes up, Allah Shemayim Basara, he goes up in a whirl. Eliyahu goes up to heaven, and Elisha starts going back. And as he starts walking back, and he meets the people that he met on the way there, first he splits the Jordan as well to walk back, and the people see, wow, the schools of the prophets, the other students of Eliyahu and Levi see, wow, the spirit of our teacher is entered Elisha, and they recognize Elisha as the successor of Eliyahu and as the leading prophet. And his first act as he comes, not mistaken, to Yericho, to Jericho, and where there is a river that was very bitter, and he asks them for a bowl with salt, I think, and he miraculously turns this river into good, healthy water that people enjoy. And then he's leaving. He's leaving the city. And as he's leaving the city, there are children who run after him and they taunt him and they say, there goes the bald one, there goes the bald one. And he turned around and he cursed them. And because he cursed them, bears come out and attack the children. I don't think the verse said that they actually died, but rather that they were mangled. They were really attacked. That's the story. Now I'm sure there's lots of commentary about what the meaning of this is all about. But first of all, it's similar to this idea that instead of having, these children were taunting you, which of course was not the right thing to do. And on the surface, it's like a miracle. Here is children taunting a prophet. They're doing that which is wrong, and a miraculous kind of punishment. But nonetheless, here the Gemara is saying that Elisha got sick, was punished because he did that. And it's similar to what happened before, in that Elisha pushed away Gehazi with two hands without giving him a way to do teshuvah. A similar kind of thing here, where there's too much discipline on these children. And that's indeed the next thing that the Mishnah here, that this Mishnaic H text lists as that which Elisha did wrong and therefore punished, getting sick. As the Gemara says, and the other time he got sick, right? The Mishnah said he got sick 3 times. Once as a punishment for inciting the bears on these children, and the other for pushing away Gehazi with 2 hands, as we described in the previous shurim at length. So they're both a similar kind of thing, hardline discipline without way of getting back. I do want to add, just as an interesting side note, this idea of bears specifically. I'm sure the commentaries on the passages there talk about this more. What this means. They call him the bald one. Ale Kerach, there was the bald one. Why are the children calling him that, and why a bear? But it's just interesting to note that one of the prophecies of the Messianic era, which is really what this Gemara began with, is the Messianic era. Those who have and lost their share in the world to come, which, as we talked about way earlier in our first classes on this tractate, is a reference to Mashiach's coming, because the Gemara discusses the resurrection of the dead in this context. So one of the prophecies of the resurrection of the dead, everybody knows the wolf and the lamb, but the very next verse reads, part of a doy, that a cow and a bear shall dwell together. So the bear is also one of those animals that are destructive, of which the prophet Isaiah says will be tame enough to live with the cow. And here he's using that same animal, the bear, in hurting these children. I'm not sure if there's a connection there, but I'm just throwing it out there, as we do often in these classes, put ideas out there and allow for our listeners to think and come up with some set kind of connections. So those are the first 2 sicknesses. The echad, the third sickness, Shemesba, is the one he died from. So he got sick 3 times. Twice as punishment, once for inciting the bears, the other time for pushing away Gehazi with 2 hands, as we described. And the third sickness is the one he died from. Shenemar, as the verse reads, Elisha chala al cholyav, and Elisha got sick from amongst his sicknesses, and then goes on to say that he died. So the fact that the verse says he got sick from amongst his sicknesses means this isn't the first time he got sick, it's other times. And cholya al cholyav, sick over his sicknesses, in the plural, means he was sick at least 2 other times. Thus the Gemara concludes that, or the Mishnah H text, this Brisa concludes that Elisha got sick 3 times. Now it could be that even this third time is also a semi-punishment, because as we just described, the Gemara didn't describe it, as I told you from Scripture, Elisha's teacher did not get sick and die. He's Allah Sarah Shemaima. He went up in a world into heaven with his body, but Elisha is getting sick and died. So maybe that too is a kind of a punishment, even though the verse says that Elisha got the spirit of Eliyahu, but maybe because I'm suggesting maybe in the fact that he had this hard line with discipline and not without allowing these children or gechazi or a way of return, maybe that itself is why he got sick and died, like the average person. And maybe when we conclude the Gemara here, we'll have some thoughts about that. Now, on the discussion of getting sick and died, the Gemara makes the following comment: Ad Avraham, until Avraham Avinu came around, lo haya zikna, no such thing as aging. Old people, young people look the same. Sounds wonderful. And the Gemara comments, Kol dechazi la Avraham, anyone who saw Avraham, Amar said, Ha Yitzchak, this is Yitzchak. Kol dechazi la Yitzchak, whoever saw Yitzchak, Amar Hi Avraham, this is Avraham. They were indistinguishable, right? With the famous commentary and the opening lines of the Parsha, Elo told us, Elo told us Avram, Elo told us Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram told us Yitzchak. This is the Chronicles of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. Why the repetition? And the famous Rashi comments there, because people were laughing and saying that Yitzchak wasn't born from Avram because of how old Sarah was, and therefore Hashem made a miracle that Avram and Yitzchak should look exactly alike, and therefore everybody was clear that they looked alike. Now if they look exactly alike and there's no aging, then they look exactly alike. Someone sees Avram and says, there's Yitzchak, and someone sees Yitzchak and says, there's Avram. Ba Avraham Rachme, Avraham died. Ba Avraham Rachme, Avraham davened, asked for mercy, that he should age. Shenemar, as the verse reads, Avraham zaken baba yomim, and Avraham got old coming of days. This is the first reference to someone getting older. And if the Gemara derives that Avraham actually davened, he prayed that Hashem should introduce this notion of aging. We'll get into the why in a second. Now, Ad Yaakov, till Yaakov came around, lo yavo chulsha. There's no such thing as ailing, of getting sick. Ba rachme, Yaakov davened, asked for mercy. V'hava chulsha, and sickness came. Shenamar, as the verse reads, Vayomer Yosef, Hine avicha chayla, and Yosef was told. Right, this is a verse in Bereshis Memches Aleph 48:1. Yosef is told that your father is sick, and therefore, the first time there's a statement of someone getting sick before they die, and therefore the Gemara derives that Yaakov actually davened and asked Hashem that there should be something called sickness in the world. Now, Ad Elisha, until Elisha came around, Lo yav inish chalish, there was no such thing as someone who got sick. The miftach who got well. Sick meant you died. V'as Elisha came, ubar rachme, and davened to Hashem, v'itfich, and people got, and there was healing. That person can get sick and get healed. Shneimar, as the verse reads, V'Elisha chala al choy v'asher yamas boy, and according to the verse we said earlier, that Elisha got ill from amongst his illnesses, of which he died, implying that he got ill before, which is how we derived earlier that he got sick twice in punishment for 2 different events. But here is the first time we see this notion that someone got sick that they didn't die from, because the verse has to say specifically, Elisha got sick from the sickness that he will die, meaning to say that all the times he got sick and got healed. And thus the Gemara attributes this notion of someone getting sick and then getting healed to Elisha's prayers. So let's try to dissect these 3 stages here. There is no aging, and Avraham davens there should be aging. There is sickness. Someone should get sick before they die. This is Yaakov davening. And then finally, Elisha says someone gets sick and then gets healed. So what's going on here? And as I do often here, the floor is open. You're welcome to share your thoughts. Here's something I'm thinking about. Rashi comments, the only time Rashi explains why, let's reverse it this way. To explain why Elisha davened that people should get healed from sickness is self-understood. He's davening, we all daven that people who get sick should get healed. Elisha did that and was successful. He brought this notion into the world that someone can get sick and get healed. It's very clear why he would want to do that. The question is, why would Avram ask for aging, and why would Yaakov ask for sickness before death? So when it comes to Yaakov's question, Yaakov's prayer, davening that there should be sickness before death, Rashi offers an explanation and says, we'll read the Rashi together on the left side. He requested that there should be something called sickness, so that there should be time for his children, for each one to come from their place, to be with him b'shas misa, at the time of his death, because his children see that he fell into bed in sickness. They know he's going to die. They come and are gathered around him. In other words, Yaakov is davening there should be something called sickness, so that there's no shock to the children. You see a healthy person, and it comes time when Hashem decides that this person has lived out their mission, and it's time for them to move on to the next world, and then there would be a sudden death. In other words, every single death was a sudden death until Yaakov asked for people to get sick. And it was very scary for those living, obviously. Unfortunately, not everybody gets sick before they pass, and sometimes, God forbid, it's a sudden tragedy, and it's very shocking to those living, and people unfortunately suffer. People living suffer for years after because of the shock they experience of someone dying on the spot. And therefore Yaakov asked there should be something called sickness. So even though Yaakov himself is suffering, but in a way it helps the grieving process. I believe even psychologically there are sickness before death is actually begins already the grieving process for children, so that they're prepared for what's coming. And that's why Yaakov asks for sickness before death, so that his children can come gather around and they can prepare themselves for what's about to happen. Now, why did Avraham ask for aging? Rashi doesn't comment. It could have been a similar thing. Rashi could have made a similar comment that Avraham asked for aging so that there is a kind of warning period. He's getting older, he's getting closer to death. But Rashi doesn't comment that. Rashi only comments with respect to Yaakov's sickness, with respect to Yaakov's request for sickness. From the Gemara, before the Gemara comments on this idea that until Avraham there was no such thing as age, the Gemara says, anyone who saw Avraham said, hey, that's Yitzchak, and anyone who saw Yitzchak said, hey, there's Avraham. And Avraham davened that there should be old age. It almost seems like the reason why he requested for aging is that they should be distinguished, so that people will be able to tell the difference between him and his son. And in fact, I just noticed now that in this version of the Gemara, they put on the side here Lakutei Rashi, which is basically they collect Rashi's commentary from elsewhere in the Gemara where it has a similar discussion, and they put it onto this page so you can see a wider version of commentary. And here they quote Rashi in Baba Metzia, where the same discussion comes up, and there it says Bar Rachmi, Avram Daven, Kadesh Yakiru ben Elben Ubei Banos, that there should be the distinction between him and his children. And so, on a simple level, one might suggest that the reason why Avram is asking that there should be distinguished between him and his children is so that for a certain sense of respect. In other words, there's something intrinsic and existential, and that a person has his unique identity that separates him from somebody else. So even as children are extension of their parents, and parents see their children as a sense of an extension, but nonetheless, even parents and children need to have an existential difference between the two of them. And therefore Avram asked that this difference should not just be in their personalities, but actually should be manifest in their physical appearance, that people should look different. And you look at somebody and you say, there's a venerable person, they look older, they look aged. It reminds me of similar to the famous Gemara, which we quote at the Seder, the Haggadah, where when Eliezer ben Azariah becomes the Nasi, becomes the dramatic story after the Rabbi Gamliel was deposed from his position as the exilarch, as the Nasi, as the prince, as the leader of the Jewish people, and they install Eliezer ben Azariah, and he's only 17 years old, according to some versions, 18 years old, or 15 years old, different versions of how old he was, but he was very young, and the Gemara tells us that Eliezer ben Azariah felt he was qualified for the job. The only problem was he doesn't have old age. And overnight, Hashem made him look old, and that he grew a white beard. We see that this idea of having a physical appearance of someone who is elder adds to a certain level of respect between people. You see somebody, even in their physical appearance, you could see there's a distinguished fellow here, somebody who's elder and therefore deserves more respect, therefore should be listened to, should be heard. And Avram is kind of asking the same thing between him and Yitzchak. Avram is obviously much older than Yitzchak, 100 years old, and yet they look exactly the same. And therefore Avram says he is asking that he should be aged, that people can say, there's the venerable elder Avraham, and here's his son, Yitzchak. And final comment. Even though we said before that Elisha maybe was not as perfect as his teacher Eliyahu, and that's why he got sick and died, whereas Eliyahu elevated, Allah Asara Shemaima elevated into heaven with his body. Yet he is the one that requests and is successful in making healing after a sickness. We know, and this is the discussion, the Gemara here we mentioned before, discussing Mashiach. Because when we talk about people who have their share in the world to come and lose their share in the world to come, it's a reference to the resurrection of the dead, the ultimate goal of the Messianic era. And of course we know, and we discussed it earlier in the Gemara here, that when Mashiach comes, there's no sickness, and there's no aging, and there's no death. So whereas Avram and Yitzchak, their prayers are really to help us cope in exile. Coping so that we have aging, distinguishing between elders and younger, and coping so that people get sick before they pass away. We hope it's not too much, just enough to get enough to make the family ready, but not. Of course, no one's asking that there should be too much suffering, God forbid. Those are all prayers of Avram and Yitzchak asking that their children in exile be able to, in a time when there is death, in a time when there is sickness, that they should be able to cope with it in a better way. But Elisha, in asking that there should be healing after sickness, is already a step closer to the messianic idea of eventually no more sickness at all. We could add even moreover. Coping in exile is part of the process of Mashiach's coming. It's something we discussed a number of times in this class, that Mashiach's coming is not something unrelated to what we do in exile, but on the contrary, as the Alter Rebbe famously says in chapter 36 and 37, specifically in the opening of chapter 37, that the ultimate goal of the revelation of Hashem that happens in Mashiach's time is not a reward for having put up with exile, but rather the net result of everything we've been doing in exile. All to say that Avram and Yitzchak, davening that we should have mechanisms in exile to cope with the exile, is in and of itself what helps us slowly get closer to the process of Mashiach coming. Perhaps. So I'll just conclude with a blessing. Of course, the floor is open for anybody who wants to comment and share what they think about this. Just conclude, of course, with a blessing that just like Elisha davened, that there should be sickness and then healing. And as the Pasuk says, that one of the blessings is like Asa Malacha, that God won't give sickness. Never mind, won't be healed. Never mind, people will get sick and get healed, but rather there's no sickness to begin with. And Rabbi would say that healing itself could be in such a way that it's as if there was never a sickness. So may it be for all of us, first of all, those who are sick should get their full and complete healing, and their healing should come in such a way that they feel like they were never sick. But on a global level, the fear that everybody feels, we should emerge from it without the PTSD, God forbid, that sometimes comes along with such fear, but we should emerge from it in such a way as if the fear was never there, as if the sickness was never there, and we only come out, if anything, stronger and better. And ultimately, this is what we hope, pray for, and believe, and have full faith that this is coming imminently. Mashiach is coming when complete, full healing comes to the world in such a manner that we feel like we were never sick, and moreover, all the things we've gone through only serve themselves as that which makes us stronger and greater, and takes Mashiach to whole new heights, or takes us to whole new heights with the coming of Mashiach, similar to this idea of aging and sickness, and then being healed from sickness is in and of itself, physically and spiritually, that which culminates in Mashiach's coming, may it be speedily in our days.